The crowd roared in celebration as my name echoed through the auditorium speakers. I walked across the stage with a practiced smile, shaking the dean's hand while cameras flashed from every direction. Years of sleepless nights, 2 part-time jobs, and relentless self-discipline had finally paid off. I was no longer the son of that man. I was Daniel Holt. Top of my class, youngest analyst recruited by the Department of Financial Crimes, and, for the first time in my life, someone people noticed for the right reasons. After the ceremony, I wandered outside to the lawn where families gathered. I stood alone for a moment, scanning the faces, waiting for my mom. She'd promised she wouldn't be late. She was all I had. She raised me, supported me through college, and reminded me countless times that we didn't need anyone else. Especially not the man who left us when I was 8. My father. The man whose name was never spoken without a sharp breath or clenched fist. But it wasn't my mother I saw first. It was him. Before we dive into the story, we'll love to thank you for your continued support to this channel. If you enjoy this story and stories like this, kindly subscribe and hit on the notification button so you don't miss any of our stories. We will love to hear from you also. Tell us where you're watching from in the comment section. We'll love to give you a shout out in our next video. Now let's begin. Standing by a tree at the far end of the crowd. Tall, slender, gray at the temples, but unmistakably him. My father. He took a step forward, then another, and before I knew it, he was standing right in front of me. "Daniel," he said, voice low and trembling. "You look just like I imagined. Taller, stronger, better." I didn't speak. My heart pounded so hard it was difficult to hear anything else. "I saw your name in the papers," he continued. I had to see you. I had to say something." He reached out and gently pulled me into a hug, and I let him. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "You became everything I hoped for." It hit me like a wave. For years, I thought I hated him. I thought he'd abandoned us. But in that moment, his voice cracked with something real, something I didn't expect. Love? Regret? Then came the scream. "There he is. That's him. Arrest him." I turned around and saw my mother storming across the lawn, 2 officers in tow. Her eyes locked onto my father, burning with fury. "Get him away from my son." The cops grabbed my father before he could even step back. I stood frozen, watching as he offered no resistance. No argument, just a tired glance in my direction. My mother reached me seconds later. "He shouldn't be here," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "That man is dangerous." I didn't speak, not because I believed her, but because something in my father's eyes before he was taken away said, "This was meant to happen. I needed you to see this." And I did. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My mother acted as if nothing unusual had happened. She poured herself a glass of wine and scrolled through her phone while I sat across the room, staring into nothingness. "Don't let this ruin your big day," she said. "He's always been manipulative. He was never safe." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something had changed. That hug, it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like truth. And the fact that she called the cops so quickly, almost like she was waiting for him to show up. "Why did he go to prison?" I asked. She barely looked up. "He committed fraud. Millions gone. Left us with nothing." "But if he stole so much, why were we broke?" She hesitated. "He burned through it. That's what people like him do." That answer sat wrong. I'd read enough fraud cases to know most criminals don't just vanish the money. They hide it, bury it, move it through names. And if my dad was the criminal she claimed he was, why wasn't our house seized? Why were there no newspaper headlines from the time? I waited until she left for her weekly book club, then headed for the basement. She never let me go down there growing up. "Too many spiders," she said. But tonight, I didn't care. Dust blanketed everything. I found old holiday lights, broken furniture, boxes of yearbooks. And then, in the far corner behind a curtain of cobwebs, a locked metal trunk. I pried it open with a screwdriver. What I found inside changed everything. A stack of newspaper clippings, None of them about my father's arrest. Just one small article about a financial investigator found guilty by plea bargain, with a curious line: no restitution required. Letters, dozens of them, in my father's handwriting, addressed to me. None had ever been delivered. They spoke of his innocence, his love, and how he took the fall to protect the people he loved most. Then the document that shattered my world, the original forensic report. It wasn't even signed by a government-certified analyst. The signature was someone else entirely, Mark Sutherland, private consultant. The pages were full of contradictions, timeline inconsistencies, missing logs, evidence that pointed to someone else, someone who forged a report and made my father take the fall. I Googled Mark Sutherland. He lived only 2 hours away, and he was dying of cancer. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes after leaving Mark Sutherland's home, my hands gripping the wheel, unmoving. The sun had already begun to sink into the edge of the sky, casting long shadows across the road ahead, but I couldn't bring myself to drive. Not yet. What Mark had confessed didn't just rattle my view of my mother. It shattered the very timeline of my life. The letters, the forged documents, the plea deal, it wasn't a mistake or misjudgment. It was a betrayal so deliberate it reached into my childhood and rewrote everything I thought I knew. My father wasn't a criminal. He was a shield. A man who took the fall for a woman who had no intention of ever telling the truth. And that woman had raised me to hate him. Every hug, every bedtime story, every sacrifice, all of it layered over lies. The next morning, I met my father at the edge of the courthouse. His clothes were clean, but you could still smell the walls of prison on him. Silence, loneliness, and concrete. He didn't look like a man broken by time. No, he looked like a man who had waited 2 decades to take one single, long breath. When he saw me, he didn't cry. He just smiled. "I knew you'd come around," he said quietly. "I'm sorry it took so long," I replied, my throat tight. He nodded and looked out at the cars passing by. "It wasn't your fault. You only knew what you were told." "I recorded everything," I said. "Mark's testimony, the forged report, all of it. Your record's going to be wiped. You'll be a free man, on paper and in life." He let out a breath he must have been holding for years. "Thank you. But there's something else I have to do," I added. "Something I need to do alone." I returned home around noon. My mother was in the kitchen, humming softly while slicing fruit, as if the world was still as it had always been. She turned and smiled when she saw me. "Morning, sweetheart. Want something to eat?" I said nothing at first, just placed a folded copy of the Tribune on the counter in front of her. She blinked, confused, then unfolded it. The headline read, "Wrongfully imprisoned for 19 years. Daniel Holt's father cleared of all charges." Below it was a picture of my dad, standing beside a lawyer, his eyes tired but dignified. Her hands trembled. The knife she held clattered to the floor. "Daniel, I can explain." "No," I said coldly, firmly. "You really can't." Her eyes widened. "You don't understand. I understand more than you think. Mark told me everything. The shell companies, the affair, the falsified reports. How you begged Dad to take the blame so your name wouldn't get dragged through the mud." She looked away, biting her bottom lip. "You let him rot in prison, Mom," I continued. "You told me he left us. Told me he was a thief. A liar. You built your entire life on the ruins of his." Tears welled in her eyes. "I did it for you." "No. You did it for yourself," I snapped. "You didn't want to be shamed. You didn't want your lifestyle, your friends, your image touched by scandal. You sacrificed him and used me to keep the story straight." She stepped toward me, shaking her head. "Please, we can fix this." "No," I said, stepping back. "There is no we anymore." The words hit her like a slap. "Daniel." I reached into my coat pocket and handed her the stack of letters I'd found in the basement. Letters my father had written to me, begging to speak, to explain, to hold on to the only part of life he had left. I read every word. I whispered, He never stopped loving me. Even when you told him to vanish. Even when he had nothing, he still thought I deserved the truth. I was trying to protect you. I laughed bitterly. You weren't protecting me. You were controlling me, manipulating the story. You thought if I hated him, I'd love you more. Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. I turned for the door. Where are you going? She asked, voice cracking. To live a life built on truth, I said without looking back. You had your chance to come clean. You chose silence. You don't get to rewrite history now that the truth is louder than your lies. Her voice rose, desperate. You're my son. I raised you, and he gave up everything for me. I replied. That makes him the real parent. I walked out, not with rage, not with fire, but with the cold, final peace of a man who had made his choice. I moved into my father's small apartment that evening. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms and a creaky floor, but it was honest. And for the first time in my adult life, I slept peacefully. My father and I spent our days slowly catching up. He told me about books he read in prison, about dreams he still held on to, and about how every time he saw a man with a young boy on visiting days, he imagined it was us. 3 weeks later, I received a message from my mother. One line, I hope one day you'll forgive me. I didn't respond. I didn't block her. I didn't scream. I just left the message there, unread. Sometimes silence is louder than revenge. Sometimes the greatest justice is watching the architect of your suffering stand alone, unheard, while the world moves on without them. My father had given up his freedom for love. My mother had given up love for freedom. One lost everything. The other lost me. If you enjoyed this story, kindly hit that like button right now. Subscribe for more stories that unravel with shocking truths and powerful endings. And don't forget to turn on the bell icon, because the next story might just be the one you never forget.